Are you ready for some more scrap happy quilting? I am, and I've been getting a lot of scraps cleared out of my sewing room working on these quilts. Last week we did a 4-patch and it came out beautiful with some great batiks and used up lots and lots of fabrics. Well, wait till you see this one. This is a lot of fun. It's a rail fence, but it's a bit different. You can see behind me, the rails are not all equally sized, but that means you can use all different size strips to make your rail fence. So it's a strip piece quilt. It goes together quick. And you add that extra rail and look at the dynamic results you get. The design is terrific. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I encourage you to give this quilt a try. The blocks are small, they're easy, they go together quickly, and look at the results. It's such a fun quilt, and you can do so much with it. I'm going to show you some ideas and ways to put it together, and there's also a download below for a similar pattern. This one's brand new, so it's not printed yet, but this pattern that I have below is very similar. So get your scrap pile pulled out and start digging through for some strips, seeing what you can find and get some colors that you love, and let's go ahead and make a quilt. If you enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I'd love to have you join me in the future and do some more quilting together, but right now we have some quilting to do. Let's get started. I just have to give you a quick peek of this quilt. It is so fun. I really love it. And if you have a lot of strips, extra pieces, and stash and scraps that are various widths, this is perfect for you. You're going to love this pattern. Let's get started. What better place to begin than with some beautiful new fabrics? And in this case, it's all about batiks. These are some new batiks that I received. This one I had to peek in. I just wanted to see what was in there. It came a couple weeks ago and I just haven't had a chance to use it. It's my Fat Quarter of the Month that I get from the Fat Quarter shop. And these are Hoffman batiks. This collection is called the Bold and Bright. And let me just open these up so I can show you all these beautiful different colors. And there's generally a color scheme or a group of colors that work well together. It's a collection of 12 different fat quarters. Oh, look at these. I love these lighter colors. It's nice to have lights and darks, and that's what I really appreciate about these fabric selections that I receive, is you get exactly that. You get the lighter backgrounds with not such saturated, intense colors, which is great. That's really fun to work with. But then you also, it's pretty monochromatic, but yet it has some great detailing with the little prints in there, and this is pretty. I like the multicolored dots. And this swirl circular pattern is popular, and you know, I've used it in a number of different colorways, and it's just great in a quilt because you get little bits and pieces, and while you get this circular pattern, you get a lot of interest in just, you know, small sections where that's curving, so it creates a really nice look against, you know, blocky patterns that are square and rectangles. When you get some curves like this, it just creates a bit more interest and sort of softens the look a bit. And of course, you know, who can't use a pretty pink, especially when there's flowers in there. Ooh, and look at this green one, again with the spiral. These are both the spirals. But look at, you know, just how different the fabric is, or I should say how the print presents itself with these beautiful colors in the background. This has pretty much a solid dark green background, but look at all the bright, you know, I want to do a green quilt and sort of make it like a garden quilt. It's just sort of an idea I have. I've always loved and I thought it would be fun to do a quilt along that idea, you know, with the grid patterns that they use, etc. But we'll see if that ever comes about. But when I see fabrics like this with the really interesting greens, that's what it makes me think of. And so this one has a navy blue background with the greens, which works out really well. So these last three are the darker navy blues, and just some really pretty colors mixed in. I like the flower here. This is, you know, with the green there. So this is some great colors to work with, and I'm pretty excited about what I can do with these. I just want to fold this up so we can get into our next group. I always find it interesting to see what it is that brings an idea of a quilt. And this is a mistake. It's been in my stash pile for quite some time now, many months. I made a quilt earlier this year using this in a rail fence, but I cut the first group wrong. So I have 63 of these that are 2.5 by 5 inch. And I couldn't decide what I was going to do with them. And so they've sat and they've sat, and I'll put a link up there for the original quilt because it turned out so pretty, but I was supposed to have cut it at 6.5. So I have all these here, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I came across them after working on the recent quilt that we just made. And these are the ones that have all these fabulous graphic batiks. And I added some Hoffman batiks in there just to get some other colors that I wanted. And these are so pretty, and this quilt turned out wonderful, and I love it. So and this was the 4-patch, if you remember. So this was a scrappy 4-patch, and it turned out great. So now what we're going to do is a scrappy rail fence. Now, I thought initially that I would use this as a rail in a block, in a square, and kind of do this and that. Well, it's a small piece, 2.5 by 5, which means if I make a square out of this with, you know, 2 halves, then my block is only going to finish at 4.5 inches. Given that I have 63 of them, which is 7 by 9 blocks, I get a 30-something by 40-something, which is a baby quilt, but it's smaller than what I want. I think it was like 32 or 34 inches. And I like to at least hit 40 on the baby quilts that I do. So I kind of set it aside, and I thought, well, what can I do with this? And by looking at it, in order to make this into a rail, I realized I was going to have to add some more pieces. So I thought, well, how about if I, you know, do a narrow piece and then another piece, and that'll make this really be interesting. And so I'm kind of dividing up the block, thinking what I can do with it. And then the next thing I know, I'm taking this out of the equation, out of the block altogether, because I like this imaginary block that I'm coming up with in my head. And it's a square, and it's going to be a, let's see, it should finish, I think, at 4.5 inches is what I have figured out. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So what about these? What am I going to do with these? So here we go. I'm going to have my square here, just like that. And not unlike we did with that last quilt, we had a 4-patch, and then we added a strip on the side. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have a rail fence block, and we're going to add a strip on the side. So this is going to sort of kind of be our rail fence right here. This will be our nice little square, but we're going to add this. Couple things. It's going to stretch my fabric to get a much bigger quilt. It's going to be probably 6 to 8, maybe almost 10 inches bigger in each direction by doing this, because I'm adding this onto the block. Now, it's not going to be a traditional rail fence because this is a rectangle. So the ordinary 90-degree turn that we do in order to make a rail fence won't work with this. But we are going to do something even better, and I got really excited. So, you know, I started talking about doing the strips. We're going to have a wide and a narrow and then a medium. And so we're going to have some accent strips that really pick up on all these glorious colors from that previous quilt. And I wanted them to be kind of dark. So I pulled out some, you know, fat quarters that I had, and actually a lot of this is leftover yardage that's been in my stash, and these are fat quarters and pieces that I've cut, and so there's some things here that I can use. And of course I have this new group of fabrics that I just showed you. I'm excited because there's some dark pieces as well as some good mid-tones that'll work. And this one, do y'all remember this? This goes back a few months, and I've used this in a couple quilts. This is the Hoffman Bally Batik called Flame, and there's some great colors in here. Let me just sort of fold this. I guess this way is the best way to do it so they don't all come apart. But I thought this would be really pretty to add some of the, for the darks, but then to get some of these bright colors, because there's a lot of the bright yellows and oranges and great colors like that in here. So I've got this going, and I thought, all right, this works. So I do have a little bundle basket that I keep of odds and ends of pieces that are too small for what I normally use. So I'm just going to set this over here. And so I have some strips that are from 1.5 to maybe 3 inches in here. And what I'm going to do is, since I have a 2.5-inch block in my log cabin block that I'm going to make in the actual square, I'm going to replicate this in that square, but then I'll have a narrow and then a medium. So I need 3 different sizes of the rail widths. They're going to be 2.5, 2-inch, and 1.5. And so I have some of all that in here. A lot of this has been left over from other quilts that I've made and bits and pieces. And this is just the one that I did that's the smaller pieces of this, so I'm glad I have that. This is just an all-time favorite. I just love that fabric. You can tell because I bought yardage of it, and I put it in just about everything. And this will work good because there's a lot of the oranges here, and there's some good yellow, a couple oranges in there. So I have a great bundle of fabric. What I'm going to do is get a block made and show you what the plan is. Now, it's going to be done in strip sets. I'm not going to cut everything down into individual pieces. I'm going to cut them into strips, put them together, and cross-cut them. And I will probably cut those strips. Let's see, I'm going to be cutting them at, I think, 5 inches. So I want to try and get them to be somewhere between 15 to 20 inches long. I don't have many that'll be the full width of fabric because most of what I have are fat quarters, but that's okay. We're going to make this work, and it's going to be so beautiful. I can't wait to show you. Let me pull some of this together and we'll get started. All right, we have a plan coming together, and we are putting our 3 strips to create our rail block. And what I started with is a 2.5-inch strip, then a 1.5, and then a 2, and I cut them in the longest lengths that I could. So the first step was to to sew the 2.5 and the 1.5 together. And I just sewed that all the way through. I stitched everything, and I used the longest pieces together first and then worked my way down to the shorter pieces that were left over and just paired everything up as I could. I wasn't too terribly conscious about the colors, other than I didn't want everything to match. I wanted some contrast. I wanted, if I had a dark fabric like this, I wanted to make sure this was just a bit darker so it doesn't all look the same. Contrast is really important when you're dealing with a rail fence, but any kind of a block that has strips that you want them to stand apart. And I want this to be an accent. I want this to be part of the quilt design, not just part of the all over design. This needs to stand out. So once this is sewn together, like I said, I did this widest one, the 2.5 and 1.5. I sewed all 63 blocks together, came back, trimmed them, cut them down, and then I added the 2-inch strip. Now, once that was on, this is where I was. So this is where I am with the 2-inch strip. And because I was using a lot of pieces from the quilt I just made, a lot of these were pre-cut in 10 inches, which worked out great because these are 5-inch blocks. So all I need to do is come in and trim this off. There was a little bit extra there, and I get all those little bits taken right off the edge. And once I'm to this point, then everything's going to get pressed. There we go. So you can see I pressed the first side. Once that was done, it was pressed. Then I added the third rail, and now I'm going to press that. and this is what it'll look like. So they're all going to have a very different look because there's a lot of different fabrics. I know there's over 30. I don't know exactly how many, but there's a lot in here. So once I get here and I give everything a good press, and you just press it to one side. It doesn't matter which way you go. You just want to press everything in one direction. Now we're going to add our extra block. So this is the block that I erroneously cut some months ago in making a quilt, and I wanted to use it. And so this is going to be my contrast. This is going to be my my rail on this particular block. So we have a rail fence here, but this is going to be the rail that's really going to be dominant and stand out in the quilt. And let me show you how that's going to work. So I have these are ready, and you see how just everything is mixed together, all kinds of colors and prints. And then we have these two, and once they're sewn, I press them to the outside towards the rail. Only because ordinarily with a lighter fabric I would have pressed it inward, but because we have these seams, it's sort of too bulky. It'll just be too much. Now we can sew our quilt like this. We're going to first sew these into long strips. So I have to look at my dimension. I don't remember if it's 7 or 9, which way these go. I think it's 7 up vertically and then 9 across. So I'm going to sew these, but what's interesting then is once we have all these rows together, we're going to turn every other row upside down. So we're going to have this alternating pattern along the way. And couple things. First off, we don't have matching seams. Oh my gosh, that just saves a whole lot of time. So as we're putting these blocks together, these go here like this, so none of these seams are matching up to anything. So accuracy, while it's always important to get the right size block, you don't have to worry about nesting seams. The only place we'll be nesting seams is where these blocks come together, right in this corner. And that shouldn't be a problem because we can make everything line up just the way we need it. So what I'm going to do now is take all these blocks and cut them apart and trim them down to make sure they're the size they need to be. They all need to be 5 inches. And then I'm going to take this stack and sew everything together. And then once I have my 63 finished blocks, I'm going to start putting them into rows, and then we're going to have a quilt here really quick. I can't wait to show you. This is going to be so wonderful. These colors are coming together. Look at that. Isn't that great? Just all these colors grouped together. Oh, it's going to be so pretty. I can't wait to see it. All right, let me go ahead and get some more sewing done, and I'll be back. And here's a pretty quilt that went together rather quickly. I love how this looks. What a fun block. And it's not quite what I expected, but I really like it. I like the fact, these almost look like little flags, don't they, going across the quilt. But you'll notice that each row, like this, is put together in one long repeating block. So all these rails go on the top, where over here all these rails are on the bottom. And so I sewed them all in the same direction, and then I just flipped every other row around when I went to assemble it, and it worked out beautifully. Now there's so much you can do with this block as well. Now you could certainly make these longer and extend this, and each block, instead of being this long, might be this long, and that would really be an interesting look. The other thing is, because these are not equal on each side, this is larger, you could turn every other one around, so that kind of sets this accent strip a little off in each row, and that sort of adds some interest. I mean, there's a lot you can do. Every other row you can turn these 90 degrees so the accent strip goes this way. It's just a lot of fun. And you know, these seams, these corners went together really well. It wasn't difficult to put together at all. Here, let me open this out a bit over here. And there we go. There's some more for you to look at. All these prints just work great together. I really, really like it. I think this is a lot of fun, and what a great scrap quilt. This will use up so many fabrics and different sizes. That's what's great if you have lots of strips. So think about the different ideas you can come up with, the different ways that you can change this, modify it, adapt it to your favorite fabrics or your personal tastes, whatever you like. There's so much flexibility here with this pattern. I really hope you enjoyed watching this today. I'm going to get a full shot of this and add that to the end so you can see what it looks like finished. I'm just so happy with this quilt, and it wasn't tough to make. You saw how easy it was. Once we got the fabric selected and cut the strips, it went together really fast. So I hope you have a chance to make this quilt yourself or your own adaptation of it. It's a wonderful, easy pattern, but please subscribe. I'd love to have you come back and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. This has been great fun. Thank you for letting me share this with you, and have a great rest of your day.